let's talk about some of the features or the advantages of cloud computing. So first is cost efficiency. Um, the one thing about going into the cloud is that there are no upfront costs. In other words, there are no capital expenses. Remember, we talked about CapEx and OpEx. There are no capital expenses. I don't have to buy hardware. Rather, I'm using somebody else's hardware, which they've already paid for, and I'm paying it on a monthly basis, or I'm paying operating expenses or OpEx. So there's no upfront costs. I've got economies of scale in many, many different ways, but cost is one of them. Because the cloud provider has been able to buy so much hardware and deploy so much hardware and has so many users, all that benefit of buying that much hardware and software gets trickled down to the users. And so it becomes from a total cost of ownership standpoint in the long term, more cost effective for you to be using the cloud. Elasticity and flexibility. Think about the last time you went to buy a computer, right? You asked yourself, well, what am I going to do on the computer? Should I buy this processor or that speed processor, this many cores, that many cores? It's the same thing businesses used to do. What size computer should I buy? How much disk space should I buy? You needed to project 3 years or 5 years down the road. Not anymore. Now you go into the cloud, you say, I'm going to try this much. This is kind of what I think I need right now, this much CPU, this much disk. And it allows you to, like an elastic band, become elastic. You can get more compute power, and then you can go back down and use less compute power. You can get more disk space, and then you can go back and use less disk space, like an elastic. So it's elastic and flexible. Speed and agility. Now in companies, you don't have to wait for your company to procure all your hardware, get it set up, get it installed. Everything is ready to go. So all your developers, anybody who needs to create those workloads in the cloud can get started right away. And it allows them to move very quickly. That's what agility means, change direction very quickly. So I can do something, try something. If it doesn't work, I can go in another direction. It allows you to fail fast, which is what most companies want to do. It allows companies to stay focused on their business. IT is normally in most companies overhead. And the more you can reduce the IT footprint, the better, because the companies want to focus on what companies want to do. And if my focus is building a product or selling a service, that's what I want to focus on. So the less I have to worry about infrastructure, the more I'm focused on my business. And so that's what cloud computing allows you to do. And then, it allows you to go global in minutes. With AWS, you can go from US East 1, the US region, to US West. You can go to other continents, Europe, Asia, with really the click of a button. All of the infrastructure is there. And so it allows you to expand your infrastructure or your business very quickly. And then if you look on the right side, you see some other advantages here: availability, reliability, auto updating, meaning software is always the latest version, and increased security. Those are all a result of the fact that the cloud providers have to focus on the most important customers. So for example, not most important, but the customer with the tightest requirements. So if I'm a bank, I have specific requirements about how available my system needs to be, how reliable it needs to be, how much security I need. So if the cloud provider doesn't meet those needs, the banks won't use them, which means everybody else gets to take advantage of all of the availability, reliability, and increased security that the most stringent requirements have. In other words, the cloud does what we call democratize technology, right? It makes it available to not only big companies, but small companies, every size company. And then we'll just finish off here with a couple of things. One is talk about cloud native, creating cloud native workloads. In other words, being able to develop solutions that use cloud native tools. So I don't know if you're all familiar with, but for example, in AWS, you have something called AWS Lambda. And at some point, you'll get to cover that, but it's a serverless platform. And if I can develop tools in a particular cloud that's cloud native, and be able to leverage some of the some of the key advantages of the cloud by using cloud native. And we talked about being cloud agnostic as well. There are some companies who still worry about being locked into a particular cloud provider, and so are trying to, try to keep their foot in at least two different places. But again, a little bit more difficult to do, but it's something that companies think about and, are often conversations. Yeah, so those were the advantages, just a couple of disadvantages, and then we'll stop because I know I'm running a little bit behind. But what are some of the disadvantages? Well, first of all, internet dependency, right? Like we talked about iCloud, Dropbox. What happens if you didn't have internet? Well, you can't access those unless you've downloaded them to your computer. So that's definitely one of them. And not only internet dependency in terms of having the internet, but the speed of the internet. If your connection to that cloud provider is not high enough, then you can't run very complex applications because the data back and forth is going to be too slow. And then there's a bit of a loss of control, right? When you set up your own infrastructure, you have a lot of decisions you can make, a lot of choices you can make. But in this case, you then have to assume, however the cloud provider has set it up for you, assume that configuration.